It is an enormously packed agenda, agreeing our budget, an update on level 4 Devo, as well as project approvals for some really important transport projects across our region. I want to say a little bit more about the budget when we get to the item, so thank you for your patience on the item, but let's get on with the meeting. Ben, any apologies?
We've received apologies from Councillor Douglas and Councillor Jeffrey.
Lovely, thank you so much. So we don't have representative from York, is that correct? Yeah, or Wakefield, lovely. Thank you so much. Declarations of interest. Any members have interest they wish to declare on any item? Jane, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. I want to declare an interest in concessionary fares because I'm in receipt of a concessionary fare card for senior citizens. Thank you, Mayor.
Nobody can believe it. Nobody can believe it. What moisturiser do you use? Okie dokie, thank you. Moving on to item 3, exclusion of press and public. No items requiring exclusion. Thank you. Item 4, minutes of December the 7th, 2023. Any comments or questions? No, thank you. Can we confirm these as an accurate record? Yes, thank you. Moving on, item 5, business planning and budget. So as I mentioned, I'd like to just say a few words as this is so important to our region. And given the significance, I think I'm hoping that the committee will indulge me. As we discussed before this meeting, we know the challenges facing local government. After 14 years of continued cuts to finances, combined with increasing cost pressures caused by demands on social care and inflation, local authorities, not just here, but up and down the country, are simply running out of money. And councils in West Yorkshire are not immune. I don't need to tell anybody around this table that you're all making impossible decisions to balance your budgets. We collectively have been pushing government for additional support, and they seem to have finally listened with an extra 500 million announced last week. But as Councillor Lewis said, this is a case of too little, too late. This is no way for government to support vital local public services. Funding needs to be put on a longer-term sustainable footing and not funded on a whim year to year. Whilst the combined authority doesn't face the same financial pressures as our local authority partners, we are still affected by cost inflation and restricted funding. We're focused collectively on delivery against the West Yorkshire Plan and launched last year our commitment to creating a brighter West Yorkshire that works for all. Now, the budget in front of you sets out how we are spending £866 million against the 5 missions that we have set ourselves. This year's budget is significantly larger than previous years, and that reflects the positive impact devolution has had on our region and the extra resources having a mayor brings. It's also a balanced budget thanks to careful management of our finances and a prudent change to how we're approaching capitalisation of project costs, releasing pressures on the transport levy and enabling us to focus revenue resources to deliver against our transformative missions. The bulk of our spending next year will be on transport. It's, after all, where the majority of our capital programme is committed. We are continuing our progress to deliver mass transit with plans out to public consultation later this year. We'll be discussing an update on the programme when we next meet, March the 14th. We're also continuing our investment to improve bus services across the region, keeping fares affordable, extending the £2 single fare cap to March 2025, which we know has helped increase the number of people travelling by bus. Investing in bus priority schemes across the region to improve reliability and investing in new routes and services to improve frequency of services, with new routes beginning in Wakefield later this month. We've also made provision in our next year's budget to deal with costs associated with Bradford Interchange. As you'll be aware, the bus facility at the interchange was closed due to public safety concerns from the end of business on Thursday, the 4th of January 2024. A piece of concrete had fallen into the underground car park underneath the bus interchange on the 22nd of December, which resulted in an immediate closure of the car park. A series of inspections were made following the fall. As a result of those inspections and further heavy rain and adverse weather conditions, the decision was made to close the whole bus interchange, with the primary reason being to ensure no member of the public was put in danger. Since the closure, an initial inspection has been conducted by an expert surveyor team. They verbally advised that the health and safety risk of reopening the bus station in its current condition is not advised. A full survey is in preparation, which will require extensive work. The Combined Authority issued further public information on Friday 19th of January to confirm that the bus station will remain closed for at least the next 2 months. This will allow time for the structure as a whole to be examined and full remediation plan to be developed. The Combined Authority has been working closely with our partners on a daily basis with Bradford Council to mitigate the impact on passengers, with an emergency plan kicking in and Jacobswell car park quickly introduced as a temporary layover. Can I thank bus users in Bradford who've adapted brilliantly to the temporary measures that have been put in place and for their patience whilst we urgently address the problems at the interchange. I'd also like to thank the officer teams at the Combined Authority and Bradford Council who've been working incredibly hard, often in freezing temperatures, to put the emergency measures in place. I've tasked the team to continue to improve public-facing communications and information about the temporary measures, as I know the things that were stood up in haste could have been improved. The Transport Committee were given an update on the situation at their meeting on Monday. We're working with Bradford to find an appropriate moment to brief all members of the Council. Now, this closure has already incurred some costs for both the Combined Authority and the Council, and we've established a mechanism to capture these costs and make provision for these to be covered by the Combined Authority in full. An initial provision has been set aside in the budget in front of us today, with a fuller report being prepared for our next meeting in March. When we next meet, we'll also be receiving a report on the outcome of the bus franchising consultation, and I'll be taking the decision on the future of buses in our region. Whether I take the decision to franchise buses or go with an improved, enhanced partnership, we want to deliver further improvements to bus services our region deserves. And there'll be more details provided at our next meeting, how we'll transition to that. But as you all know, we're more than just transport. We're continuing to invest in our skills programmes, supporting more than 75,000 people to learn new skills since 2022. We're continuing to back Culture for All, backing our Years of Culture, Bradford as UK's City of Culture in 2025, and supporting our creative industries to flourish. We're tackling the climate emergency, delivering on our promise of a greener West Yorkshire, helping residents to retrofit their homes, businesses to decarbonise their processes, and our transport network to go green. We'll continue to back our businesses to grow and create jobs, backing booming sectors in health tech, digital and manufacturing, and delivering on the investment zone we've secured from government. And we'll continue my focus on keeping women and girls safe, maintaining our investment in a new team of police community safety officers, support officers, dedicated to West Yorkshire's bus network, maintaining the Mayor's Community Safety Fund, putting cash seized from criminals back into the hands of the community. We can't do any of this alone. We work in partnership with the councillors around this table, and I've already referenced the challenges you are facing, and this budget recognises that. As we've discussed at the end of last year, we're keeping the transport levy frozen, whilst, as you know, others around the country are increasing it. And later in the agenda, we'll be approving £15 million of capacity funding to councils to help deliver on our collective priorities that we know are so vital. I want to end by referencing two other things ahead of us this year. This is a budget being set ahead of the second ever West Yorkshire mayoral election, and the Combined Authority has made provision to cover those costs. Those costs, I might add, would come down should a general election be declared on the same day. But whether that happens, well, that remains to be seen. Whenever the general election is held, we may well have a change of government. If that happens, we'll have to ensure the teams here at the Combined Authority are flexible enough to respond to new opportunities that may come our way. And I've tasked Ben and his director team to keep that in mind, whatever the outcome of the election is. So, after that introduction, thank you again for your patience. Can I pass to Angela to talk us through the business plan and budget in more detail? Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Mayor. Setting out a very complex picture there of successes, ambitions and challenges. I'll run briefly through the paper, highlighting the key points, and then happy at the end to take any questions or comments any of you may have. To start with, the business plan and budget follow on from the position that was considered in December. It's had input along the way from the Finance Resource Corporate Committee, from review from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Governance and Audit Committee members have considered the Reserves and Treasury Management Statement, and there's been engagement with local authorities through the finance directors. The first part of the paper sets out the business plans in the form of plans on a page. So the multi-year business outcomes previously considered by the Combined Authority have now been developed into detailed business plans for each directorate, with a wealth of detail in terms of individual actions, deliverables, accountable officers for them. The information in Appendix 1 summarises these as plans on a page for each of the directorates and one for the corporate centre. If these are approved today, we will use that to shape the outward-facing corporate plan that will come back in draft for your consideration in March. The paper then goes through the budget that's needed to support those activities. So we have the revised outturn for the current year, which shows a small surplus after allowing for the transfer of investment income in support of the capital programme, which I'll come back to later. We've then shown in Appendix 3 the total spend anticipated for next year, bringing together both capital and revenue in one place and shown against the corporate priorities, which is the 866 million the Mayor referenced earlier, which is over 200 million more than we are expecting to spend this year. Appendix 4 then pulls out the revenue element of that. Within that, we have the assumption that the transport levy continues unchanged. It has been at this level for a number of years, and we are against the crowds who are increasing transport levies in other parts of the region. We do, however, recognise the challenges local authorities are having in setting budgets, so we're seeking to manage with the levy unchanged and a small portion of that going to support the local contribution needed for the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund, as we've done in previous years. Within that revenue budget, we're also drawing down the last of the transport reserve we set up to support on the tendered service pressures. We have a statutory duty to deliver the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme, where we reimburse bus operators for carrying seniors and disabled. That uses over a third of the levy, and that is money that comes from yourselves. There is no direct government support for that. We supplement that with the young persons concessions of 10 million, and then a big chunk of the rest of the transport levy goes on bus tendered services, where we are supplementing routes that operators deem non-commercial, but which are needed by our communities. And that budget continues to be under pressure every year through both inflation and increased demand. We also include in the budget support for access bus services and for school services. And we've also committed to undertake a review with our partners about the way in which schools transport is provided and funded. And we will be setting out a plan shortly on how we intend to do that. So working with people around this table and beyond to do that. Appendix 5 gives the indicative capital programme and indicative funding for the next 4 years. At the moment, it sets out the funding we know we have. It clearly has some gaps at the end of that period where current funding comes to an end. And the focus is very much on ensuring we deliver the programmes we've committed to government, as that will help shape the success of future bids for funding such as City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Round 2 and obviously our mass transit requirements which are coming forward to the next meeting. There are significant inflation pressures in that capital programme. That's partly due to the time lag between plans and costings being drawn up and the high inflation we've seen in the last few years, but also just because of the time that often elapses between putting bids together and actual delivery happening. Things change in the world around us, projects come back and often need additional funding. So we are seeking to try to deliver that full programme of projects across the region with our partners, and to that end we have allocated our the investment income that we have earned due to some of the cash balances we have had through the timing of the capital grants. We've allocated that to the capital funds across the 4 years, and we will be continuing to review that and ensure we use that to best effect. We've also sought to maximise capitalisation for staffing costs, for example, and internal costs, so we can reduce the revenue burden on partners. The report also provides Treasury Management Strategy, which I said before was considered by members of the Governance and Audit Committee last month, who endorsed it, and also the General Reserves position, which is not being increased, but is clearly at a high risk of being required in the coming year, given the risks that continue to face the authority. So, in conclusion, we will be continuing to monitor the budget closely, reporting back regularly to both Combined Authority and Finance Resources and Corporate Committee. There are a number of moving parts of this budget, some of which are still very much moving, not least Bradford Interchange, which the Mayor mentioned earlier. We've flagged in the paper we are monitoring, gathering the emerging costs, and we hope to be able to bring an update to the next meeting and how we will provide that within budget. We're also seeking to establish a longer-term financial strategy to demonstrate how we can best manage and deploy the funding for ourselves and our partners in the longer term. And we're also looking at efficiency and value for money metrics in conjunction with the finance directors. And there's a note on that at Appendix 7. So while we do present a balanced budget today for 24-25, we will need to start planning immediately for how we tackle the budget gaps in the subsequent years and adapt for those changes that, as the Mayor highlighted, we're in a year of change. We need to be agile and adapt to that, and we'll be bringing reports back to address that as the year progresses. I'm happy to hand back on at that point to the Mayor and any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And if you've not had time to look at those plans on a page, it's definitely worth a close look. There's a huge amount of work that's going on underneath that plan on a page, but that just shows our ambition and our determination to move at speed to make, as we all agree, that brighter West Yorkshire. Okay, so any thoughts on the budget? Yes, so Councillor Lamb, Councillor Paulson, Councillor Galton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And can I just start by thanking Angela and the officer team for the work that they've done on the budget and for the time they've made available to us to answer our questions and help us with our understanding. It's greatly appreciated. So I just wanted to say that to start with. I'm going to propose a couple of modest amendments to what's in front of us, but just in response to the things you said at the start, Mayor, some of which I agree with, some of which not so much. In terms of the national context, I do agree with you that there needs to be a change in how local government is financed, giving longer term certainty, waiting until late in December to see how much money you've got for the year ahead really isn't satisfactory or a good way to do things. It's been that way for a long time and it needs to change. There's not enough money in local councils. I have been part of the lobbying efforts to try and get more, and I was pleased that something came last week. I agree it wasn't enough, but it was better than nothing, and it was a start. Where perhaps we start to diverge is if you talk to senior officers in councils across the region privately and in this place as well, there's an acceptance there is enough money in the system. It's just not in the right places. You may look at me blankly, but yeah, they may not go on the record to say that, but privately they do think that. There's a lot of money around in the system. It's very different coming here from our council. In our council, we come from executive meetings where there's a real struggle to find the money to pay for vital services that people depend on. Here, it feels very different. It feels we're looking for things to spend all the money that we have. So it's my opinion, Mayor. You will obviously disagree with that. I think it is time for much smarter conversations, not just between combined authority and councils, but also the health sector, who haven't been asked to make the same kind of efficiencies and savings that councils have been asked to make repeatedly year after year. There is more capacity and flexibility within that system to work together. There is duplication across partners, and there's a risk, we'll come on to level 4 devolution later on, that we're going to go even further with that duplication, with different groups and organisations looking to do similar things and all creating bureaucracies and officers and teams to deal with those things and adding expense where it's not needed. So I think there's more this combined authority can do to support local councils now. And our colleagues around the table will say they've had you said you described them as impossible decisions to make. Well, I think there's an easy one. I think there's a bit of money from the 800 million plus budget here that could go back to local councils and really help them to protect some of the things that are being done that I don't think would need to be done. So my proposed amendment is that we reduce the transport levy by £10 million. I think there's enough money and capacity within the rest of the budget to make up and deliver those projects with efficiencies. And while it's not specific to the budget, I think we should commit here that we take £7.5 million of the unallocated gain share funding to distribute to local councils to enable them to be able to protect frontline services and not do things like introduce district centre parking charges and introduce charges for, or increase fees and charges, or close leisure centres and libraries and services that people absolutely depend on. A lot of the things in this budget are nice to do things. The things councils are having to do are things people absolutely depend on. And while this wouldn't solve the budget challenge or pressure for each council, it would help them enormously. Roughly, Leeds' share of that combination will be 5.8 million, which I think Councillor Lewis could do a huge amount more to protect vital services for people. And I don't really think people in West Yorkshire would notice the difference that it would make to the budget that we're setting here today. So that's my proposed amendment with the reasons why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. And just to remind the councillor that you remember the 51 million that we've redistributed and that we are about to approve 15 million as additional from the gain share for extra capacity. Just to remind the councillor that the combined authority has a different role to local authorities. We are looking at transformation to our region so that we can, and the bulk of our money is for transport, and we have to have that dedicated vision about how we improve transport in West Yorkshire, because you will not get people to jobs, to opportunities, to colleges, to grow our economy so that people have more money in their pocket if we don't have that brilliant transport network that we all collectively share that ambition. But I am sure that there are local authority partners that might like to, just before I come back to you, Councillor Paulson, who would like to respond to your further comments. If I may, Councillor Lamb.
Very quick.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm talking about 1.5% of the budget here, which is a very minor efficiency compared to what everybody else is having to say. I fully understand all the things. I didn't need reminding. I'm well aware of how the budget works and what our role is. 1.5% is what I'm talking about, which would make a huge difference to the residents we all represent.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Lamb. I was smiling really as you were talking about officers doing a bit of grumbling. We've all got officers who do a bit of grumbling here in the combined authority and here in each local authority. I think it would be a pity to mistake the grumbling that goes on for rigorous analysis of what's happening to us in terms of local government finance. Councillor Lamb is absolutely right to pinpoint this situation and the very, very temporary and insufficient additional help that the government's given us. But actually, in some ways, what Councillor Lamb is proposing is exactly what central government have been doing, which is basically one-off payments, one-off funds, and so on. And I think as a combined authority, we have got a real responsibility, not just in the here and now spending in terms of bailing things out here and now, but actually thinking about the stewardship for the future. And much of what we're doing is actually about the stewardship for the future of how we want West Yorkshire to be. So lovely and attractive and sparkly and dangly the proposal is in terms of this year. I'm not prepared to fetter the future of our children and our grandchildren for one-off, extra pots. Actually, we have to also exercise stewardship for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I think some of the comments Councillor Lamb made is actually lobbying government for the lack of funding. So I'm quite surprised at that. So looking across this budget paper, I think tackling the financial crisis has been a priority for the last 8 months across all local authorities and within the combined authority. The paper does set it out that the combined authority is dealing with the crisis across their work areas and the programmes, as well as setting out a business plan for the future. The key is investing in our future, our infrastructures to enable things to happen. Raiding the cupboard is not going to resolve this issue. We need to be very, very prudent, and I think we are making decisions here that are for the future of all local authorities. And I think our time would be better spent asking the government to give funding in a timely fashion, a timely manner, and allow us, rather than scrambling for piecemeal. So I totally disagree with some of the things you said. It is about, yes, we are struggling as local authorities, but equally you should be articulating your voice back to government to say, we need the funding now.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Okay, so do you have an amendment that you want to propose? You will need a seconder. Councillor Paulson will second. I wonder if you could talk us through it, Caroline.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Lamb has proposed an amendment, I think, to recommendation 10.5 in terms of the size of the transport levy. That amendment to the recommendation has been seconded. So in accordance with our procedure rules, it's appropriate at this point to take a vote on whether that amendment is supported or not.
Thank you.
If that amendment is supported, that would become the recommendation in the paper.
As seconder, would Councillor Paulson like to speak?
Are we going on to other topics after the vote, or?
Yes, we are. We're dealing with this issue
That's fine.
for now. Yeah.
No, fully support it. I can't believe that some of the leaders of councils think this is. We're not talking about slashing the combined authority budget in half here. We're talking about a small amount to go to actually help in the local authorities, and I think it makes perfect sense. I think Alan has said it very, very eloquently and clearly. Exactly why the reason is for this. So I would be very, very surprised if the leaders of the councils across West Yorkshire don't support something that absolutely makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. So we'll take it to a vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against the amendment? The amendment falls. Thank you. So moving on, Councillor Paulson, you had further comments.
Yes, a few issues on the Bradford interchange. Firstly, on a financial side, you said there'll be another report coming in March, I believe, just about the funding on this. Because obviously it's not just the funding of the WICA funding, there's the loss of income and cost to Bradford Council. We've lost a key car park in the city centre as one item, which is impacting on local residents, businesses, etc. So are we looking at that funding coming from the existing transport pot, or are we looking at reserves for the costs of the interchange? And then there will be the, no doubt, repair costs, I assume, once we know what the problem is. So that's sort of on the finance side of it. But I'm really, really disappointed with the combined authority over how this has been handled, I'm afraid, and communicating to myself as a board member. It took nearly 2 weeks for anybody to come back to me with any update when I asked about what was happening with this. I've had to chase, I think in that 2 weeks, 3 times to get any information from the combined authority. And then I got a small report 2 weeks ago, and that's all. It was raised at our full council meeting, and there was dissatisfaction across the whole chamber of the council about the poor communication. I'm glad it has eventually gone to Transport Committee on Monday, because I think as a lot of people have a lot to say about it. People understand that things happen, there are problems, concrete falls. There's lots of queries about has there been a lack of maintenance on the building. Anybody who's not been, it is quite an unusual designed building. So, you know, what is the maintenance position on it? Why did the concrete fall? But the simple thing, the communication really has been very, very poor. And I really hope that we can now learn from that, and particularly Bradford councillors want to know what is happening. To just be sent a 5-line press statement from the combined authority is not a good enough briefing, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry to have to bring negativity, but the finance, and then obviously can we improve the situation on comms? Thank you.
Thank you. So 2 questions there. So Angela first, then Simon.
Yes, thank you. I think you spelled out exactly why we haven't brought costs to you today. It is a complex set of interrelationships that we need to address. So we are very much gathering information across a number of different fronts on the actual and expected exposure from all aspects. So we are looking, as you say, at all those elements you talked about, and we will be looking at then a range of options of how that is funded, depending on what those costs end up being. But rest assured, we are in the midst of trying to gather those, and we'll bring them in a sort of contained way, making sure we've captured everything with solutions and options of how we proceed. Simon might like to add to that when he picks up the next
Simon, then Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Matt. So, as I have done in between, I apologise to Councillor Poulsen if at any point she's felt less than well briefed on the situation, and we are putting arrangements in place in that regard. I think the one element that I would just like to stress is, in addition to the press material that we've provided, we have put significant effort into ensuring that our customer information is very, very regularly updated using all of the channels available to us. And in that regard, we've also had terrific support from colleagues in the council, but I should also note actually terrific support from colleagues in the rail industry as well, with Northern Rail having provided space for us in their facility so that as quickly as possible we could get a interim travel centre presence back up and running. But I do note Councillor Poulsen's comments, and I can assure you that we will ensure that all members are regularly briefed.
Thank you. This obviously happened over the Christmas period as well, which can't have been helpful. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Can you? Yes. So this is something now, as Councillor Paulson says, we've debated at Transport Committee earlier this week, and also at full council actually. I've included it in my leaders report. So I think we've all said obviously the communications needs to be more regular, and if there's nothing to say, it's best just to do something just to keep people updated. And there are a lot of unknowns at the moment about this situation. That's why the surveyors are in. My understanding is to look at what the structure's like and plan for the future. And I know the Mayor is very keen to make sure that we obviously keep 2025 in mind and make sure there's a great welcome for people coming to the district during that year. So this is a priority, isn't it, Mayor, for the combined authority to make sure this matter is resolved one way or the other as quickly as possible, and it needs short, medium and long-term plans for the building. And at the moment, I don't suppose there's enough information for anybody really to start making assumptions about what that looks like, but as soon as there's information available, then absolutely it should be shared so we can all have a look. It's a crucial bit of infrastructure for our city centre and for our district, and of course the timing with all the regeneration works that have gone around the city is inconvenient really for the city, for the district, and of course members of the travelling public. So it is important for all of us, and I think we all recognise that, to get this resolved and a way forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
And just to reiterate, this cannot hold back the ambitions of Bradford for the City of Culture 2025, and we are tasked with making sure that happens. Any further comments on the budget? No, thank you, sir. As Councillor Galton, apologies.
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to back you up in terms of the proposal that was put at very short notice by Councillor Lamb.
That's the process.
Well, a little bit of prior notification is good manners, usually, especially for other parties that haven't been subject to your discussions. However, the principle is that this is a combined authority, which its legitimacy comes from the election of the Mayor, and it is the Mayor's priorities that the budget should be focused upon, and she will be judged by the delivery of those priorities. And for this to be seen as some kind of regional honeypot is a danger, I think, because it ends up becoming something akin to laundering of public money. And we already have problems with the governance between the individual local authorities and the combined authority in terms of knowing when a decision has been taken and by whom, making sure you get value for money. So I'm more than happy for the money to stay where it is, but to enhance the transparency of how it is spent on our behalves. At the end of the day, the majority of this is delegated money, which comes from central government and has rules enwrapped around it already. And it's our job to make sure that those rules are applied with the greatest level of equity for the people of West Yorkshire, which is what brings me to one of my comments really on the budget. I had a look at the equality impact assessment. It was very brief and it was very broad. And this forward plan budget obviously covers a lot of subject matter. And I think it would be useful for our new inclusion lead to talk to us about how we can do it better, actually, because there's so many things in here. For instance, the discussion we had about concessionary travel. There is a big campaign from bus fare to say, actually, it should be extended because it discriminates against working age disabled people, and it discriminates against retired people who have to access health appointments, for instance, which don't sit within our restricted timetable. And that doesn't get a reference at all in the Equality Impact Assessment. So I think we need to think of a better way of doing that. And then, secondly, there is a particular one, and it's to do with the bus franchising. I'm very much in support of the Mayor's efforts to get us to a franchise model. In fact, I've been a little bit frustrated it hasn't been a bit quicker. But there is a worry for me in here where it talks about how the costs, if you are successful in terms of this financial year, they haven't been associated within the budget in terms of a budget line. But I understand that they could be up to £5 million. So is it to come out of reserves? And if it does so, what impact does that have on the reserves? Because there are later items where we are redistributing funds, and it would be good to know that they couldn't have been needed for something else. And this is I represent a community which has had transport schemes cut back through to inflation pressures. So there are a lot of costs in there that appear out of nowhere that you weren't anticipating when schemes got planned. And to have a £5 million hole that hasn't been attributed in a budget is, for me, quite a big risk.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. I'll come to Ben on the EDI point, but just to reiterate, the decision is going to be made March the 14th. So obviously there's no way that Angela and her team can allocate budgets for something that is the decision is yet to be made. But Angela, if you could come to that point.
Yes, thank you. As you say, the decision hasn't yet been made. We're aware, obviously, that we will have to move in an agile way to adjust our budget accordingly. The business case sets out the figure that Councillor Galton quoted. The business case also set out a range of options of where that funding could come from, and we'll be pursuing those options and coming back with a revised budget in due course. Those options included use of reserves, use of borrowing, potential gain share. There may be others, and they were the key ones at that point, but we need to weave that into the budget, and depending on the decision will depend on the costs. So we'll be back with that at a future date when we've had opportunity to consider the impact of the decision once it is made.
Thank you. And of course, the Inclusivity Champion is joining us later, so it's something that we could potentially raise with her. But Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Galton, I think, makes some really helpful and sensible points. The back of the, I think it's Annex 8 in the pack's got the full Stage 1 EQIA assessment that Sarah led on for us. And of course, that is high level given the nature of the paper, given the nature of the budget. And of course, individual EQAs would be done on individual policies and projects as they are developed, both Stage 1 and Stage 2. So there's, at this point, I don't think the intention was to give more than an overview, but you're absolutely right that we could do more. We could bring out more of the impacts. The key thing for us, I think, is to ensure that the EDI and the EQI assessments are about how our policies and how the projects enhance those outcomes, not just deal with any negative impacts. And that's the kind of thing we need to be looking at going forward. So take your point about doing more, we'd absolutely pick that up going forwards. But please don't think that it wasn't a major consideration in all of the work that we've done, and indeed in the development itself.
Thank you so much. Okie dokie. Let's if we could take a vote on the budget and the recommendations from 10.1 to 10.12. Can I see a show of hands who are ready to approve the budget? And those against the budget? And abstentions? Thank you so much. So the budget is passed. Thank you so much, colleagues. Moving on to item 6, which is the Shared Prosperity Fund. This report provides a further update on progress since implementing the West Yorkshire UK SPF local investment plans. This includes our core UK SPF and Multiply programme and the Rural Fund. This paper seeks to approve a delegation to the Chief Executive to authorise the final list of successful projects selected in response to Pillar 3, People and Skills Invitation to Bid, in consultation with myself following the conclusion of the assessment process this month to a maximum of 10 million. This is needed to deliver this at speed so we can benefit our communities and allow delivery to commence the 1st of April 2024. The people and skills strand is a key part of the fund and our ambitions to create a more prosperous and inclusive economy. Interventions funded will help to reduce barriers to employment, supporting people to access jobs and education. So we're hopeful we can see an exciting portfolio of projects starting to deliver to complement the good work already going on in our region. So can I hand over to Sarah Eaton, our Director of Strategy, Comms and Intelligence, who will give us a few headlines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just run through some key elements in the paper that will provide additional background in terms of supporting those recommendations. But as colleagues are aware, there are currently 3 pillars in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that are set out in the paper there. And the paper details our total allocation for UK SPF for West Yorkshire. So there's approximately 79 million in there, about 68 million there for core SPF, and about 11 million in there for Multiply, plus an additional 2.5 million there for the Rural Fund, and that gives our total allocation of around £82 million. Just in support of information about the Pillar 3, which is one of the main focuses of the paper today. In July, the CA approved the invitation to bid for Pillar 3. And following on from that Pillar 3 set out 3 main objectives, which are set out in the paper around reducing levels of economic inactivity, supporting people furthest away from the labour market, and supporting local areas to fund gaps in local skills provision. So quite an important part of the programme of work. So just in terms of that application round, an open and transparent application round was launched in October to the value of £10 million, and it closed in January of this year. As set out there, and as you'll see within that kind of paper, there is a description of the selection process that we're going through at the moment to enable us to deliver that on time, really, and to kind of move forward from April. That delegation is really important to allow us to kind of set off from the 1st of April with the kind of selection of the projects that we want to kind of progress with. So that's one of the key recommendations in the paper is around that delegation, really. And I'll come on to some of the challenges in the fund in a short while. The paper also sets out the core UK SPF progress today, and you'll see there that about 85% of the core UK SPF allocation of 65 million has now been contracted out. So there's been some good progress in kind of committing spend for core SPF. And I think while that good progress has been made, I think one of the key challenges for us, as colleagues are probably aware, the delays to the programme launch that have made it really challenging, I think, for projects to kind of deliver and get up on the ground. So we've got some challenges there in terms of kind of spending within the short envelope of time that we've had to kind of deliver. There's also been challenges with the intervention rates and the kind of the capital and revenue allocations, and obviously changes to guidance that have happened during this period of time. So real pressure on areas to fill to kind of get delivering. But we have committed the spend, so that's a really good progress from local authorities in terms of kind of progressing plans forward. And I think just in terms of from mounting pressure, I think not just from this area but from other areas, the government has now notified as that we can kind of carry on underspends forward. So that is a good thing, but clearly we've still got that pressure to spend as we move forward. The paper also sets out some really good progress around Multiply in terms of some of the delivery of key elements of that programme in there, which is really heartening to see. And you'll see there, for example, you know, that 84% of participants, for example, who've received maths training have reported an increase in confidence. So that programme is starting to deliver on the ground. That's really, really important, I think, for us to kind of note in this paper. I think thirdly, the last element of the paper is about the Rural Fund, and we're seeking some kind of changes to the operating model in the Rural Fund, particularly because despite the fact that we've gone out, we've got a lot of new people who are really interested in delivering against this fund. We've not managed to kind of spend that completely at the moment. So I think one of the recommendations here is around how we kind of change the operating model to make sure that we can get more projects from rural areas coming forward. And you'll see in there that some of the key things, changes to the operating model that we're looking for is an increase in the intervention rate to make this more attractive to cap perhaps projects out there, but also to try and think about the maximum increase in the grant from £50,000 to £100,000. We're hoping that will increase the number of projects that are coming forward. And I'll stop there, Mayor, just in terms of the key points.
Thank you, Sarah. And just to keep reflecting on the fact that it's 2/3 of what were the EU funding's equivalent, it's also incredibly complicated and it was late. So this is proving incredibly challenging. And also SMEs, which are, but majority of the rural companies that are SMEs, having the time to actually bid in a complex process. I think increasing the opportunity probably makes an awful lot of sense. Any comments on the UK SPF? Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just specifically on the rural one, I raised this before at meetings and frustration about how this is being advertised out, particularly the visitor economy, the tourism infrastructure, food processing. And I think I asked at a previous meeting, it said there were workshops, one per local authority. I did ask, you know, where they were and how they were advertised, so it would be good to have that detail on them. It's quite disappointing, 14% of the available funds being allocated, and there's a lot of organisations out there that really would benefit from this funding. I know recently at the last Bronte Country Partnership meeting, where a lot of our visitor organisations attend, people like the National Trust, etc., go to this, they knew nothing about this. And I think that's really disappointing. So I really think we need to do more to push this. We need to be out where the key visitor attractions are in those areas, and we need to be out talking to people and working with the local authority, with tourism teams, etc., to make sure we're in the right place talking to the right people, because I think there's an awful lot that people could benefit from this that just don't know anything about it, and that's such a shame.
Thank you, and that's obviously a really great approach, Councillor Paulson, that people do need to know more about this. And one of the challenges of the Combined Authority is often that we're doing amazing stuff, but people are too busy to see or read or, you know, open emails and so on. But Sarah, I wonder if you could just reflect on that.
Yes, I have gone away and had a look at some of the marketing that's been done. There has been extensive kind of promotion of the scheme, looked at where the events are, and I can share the detail after the meeting, Councillor Paulson, in particular in Bradford, an event in October at Clark Foley Community Centre. So there's been a range of events between September and November of last year in terms of where this has been publicised. Lots of work with council growth managers around promotion of the events, social media, networking channels, done work with the National Farmers Union. So there's been quite a lot of activity take place. We're hoping that has kind of generated more interest, and that interest will then result in applications coming forward. But it is something that is of concern, and it's something that we are continuing to try and promote through the key channels that we've got. But I will share the detail just so that you can see that.
Thank you. And Councillor Paulson, thank you too for being such an advocate for the programme, because of course, as councillors, you are speaking regularly to your community, and for every meeting, for you to say, have you applied for this, is obviously going to be incredibly helpful. Councillor Scullion and then Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. We have worked really hard in Calderdale in terms of pushing awareness of this fund, and I myself have been whipping officers in terms of making sure that they knew about it, and it has been widely circulated. I've seen it on all kinds of social media and so on. And 18 businesses in Calderdale have applied and 3 have been successful. And I think it is really, really difficult within the criteria and within the time scale, really. It's not easy, but keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, and then Mandy.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The bit of feedback I've had from businesses locally is similar to what you alluded to. It's very difficult to write the bids. They're very complicated, and it's quite a skill writing these things. And if people don't have in their organisation, it's difficult. And I've seen a few examples where they have put a bid in and been rejected, and when the feedback comes, so it's, well, by all means have another go because we think you're eligible, but the quality of your bid isn't sufficient. I just wonder if there's a step we can put in to help people before the bid's considered and say, actually, you need to do a bit more work. These are the gap. If that feedback could be given, the feedback's offered afterwards, but it's too late then. If that feedback process could come in the interim and say, you could do a bit more work to strengthen it, and if you did, you'd probably qualify. I just wonder if that's something practical we could do to help people and just get that feedback in before a decision's made.
But doesn't this also underscore the point that devolution, why we're having to jump through these hoops for actually relatively £2.5 million for a rural fund when businesses are busy just trying to keep their heads above water? Just give us that deeper devolution, that single settlement. Thank you. I'll come back to you in a moment, Sarah, but Mandy, if you've got further comments.
Yes, I think it underpins an awful lot about what we're doing. There has been a lot of marketing on that, but the simplification of the business offer and the understanding, as Councillor Lamb mentioned, is really helpful. And it's great to see in the West Yorkshire Plan further up the notes that simplification is something that we're looking at on a West Yorkshire perspective, but with a local nuance. So I think hopefully the work that we'll do will start to make that easier for businesses in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. And as is always the way, when there are governmental hoops we have to jump through, it's very frustrating. We could maybe make it easier if we had control ourselves. Sarah?
I think some of that support has been provided, but I think we are definitely looking at this fund and what we can do. So I'll take that away and suggest that as something that we could perhaps build in over the current months, really, that kind of just first step for people who perhaps haven't put one in and not been successful, how we can support them. So yeah, I'll definitely take that.
Thank you so much. Okie dokie. We're all happy to note the recommendations. Yes, thank you so much. Okie dokes. Back to you again, Sarah, on level 4 devolution. Item 7. This report provides an overview of the level 4 Devo framework published by government last November. The framework is the conclusion of a lot of work by colleagues in the UK mayors. This is the new name for the M10 because we will be getting more mayors on stream soonish. To put in this, a group have been persuading government to give mayoral combined authorities that are ready and mature additional powers. As chair of UK mayors, I led that conversation with government alongside Ben as the lead chief executive. And can I put on record my thanks to you, Ben, for the leadership that you've shown at short notice to get us to a point where we can have a level 4 framework. This doesn't impact us, this also impacts other mayors, and the work we've done is going to be really welcome for them. So thank you so much, Ben, for that work. The framework allows the combined authority to apply to access new powers, functions and flexibilities. Although it doesn't go far enough, we want that single settlement that we've seen in the Trailblazer deals in Greater Manchester and West Midlands. It is a bridge and a stepping stone towards the single settlement that we absolutely need. The report outlines the work we've done in partnership with councils to develop West Yorkshire's response to the framework. And can I thank my council colleagues in the Combined Authority and councils working at such pace on this. And as a result of this work, I'm pleased to confirm that I and the 5 leaders around the table sent a joint letter to Michael Gove earlier this week expressing our interest in opening a negotiation to secure level 4 status. A good news story for our region. Can I hand over to Sarah Eaton to talk us through?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in terms of the paper gives a brief overview of the Level 4 devolution framework. And as the Mayor has just said, we see this as a stepping stone to that deeper devolution. Doesn't give us everything that we would have hoped in terms of a trailblazer deal, but is that really good start in terms of taking the work forward. And I think some of the challenges that we've talked about today highlight the need for kind of moving in this general direction. So just in terms of the framework, there's some key highlights in there of significance. I think is the things that we've been talking about today is that funding simplification. So you'll see in those highlights the offer of 2 consolidated pots there, both for DLUC funding and for transport funding, which would be very much welcomed. There are also some other highlights identified in the paper, particularly, for example, removal of gain share gateway review, so that reduction in potential bureaucracy that we're getting from a national level, that much more of an opportunity to kind of look at evaluation from a local level, which would be really important for us in terms of moving forward. From an employment and skills perspective, further commitment towards a more devolved adult skills system, and for example, housing and land, that local leadership of the Affordable Homes Programme, net zero, kind of that devolving of net zero funding, including kind of retrofitting money. And for public health and new concurrent power to kind of take on the public health duty. So there's a range of offers and flexibilities within that paper that are set out. I think the other thing to kind of point out is that this is an ongoing process. So there are other opportunities in there that are highlighted, and you'll see there that it makes reference to technical adjustments to historic legislation. I think this is something that we can look at over the coming period, but that is looking at where we've perhaps had old legislation that is now not fit for purpose in terms of the work that we're wanting to take forward. So there's an example in there set out around currently decisions around where the location of roundabouts is made by the Secretary of State, and actually why can't we do that at that local level? So there are things there that we can be exploring over this coming period. And I think the other element there to say, because it's a framework, is that we can now take on any powers or responsibilities, flexibilities that other areas have kind of taken up, should we wish to do so. The paper also sets out some of the kind of process timeline and readiness conditions that we need to meet. And there's a list set out in the paper. I think one of the big issues there is around how we provide confidence in our capacity, governance, the culture that we've got. And we've got a really strong track record in this region of delivery, and that is going to set us in good stead really for taking forward the deal. You'll also see there that kind of ministerial decisions around approving this will be taken in the round. But as a key part of this, there are other elements which I'll touch on in the paper linked to the scrutiny protocol, which we'll need to satisfy in terms of taking the work forward. In terms of the application process, the deadline's the 31st of January, so it was yesterday, and as the Mayor said, we have now submitted a letter. Areas were allowed to submit later, but there's no guarantee of when that decision would then be made. So we've tried to be really proactive and kind of move it forward, and that has been done in partnership with all of the councils in the area. That's been a really important factor in taking this work forward in terms of getting the benefits for the region as a whole. So in terms of these discussions that have taken place, the Mayor and local authority leaders agreed that they would want to proceed with a full range of activities set out in that Level 4 framework. And that was reported to the Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee on the 18th of January. The letter has since been published now, and you will have had it in a pack that has been circulated. You'll be able to see the full content of that. I think what it's really important to note is that this is the start of the process. And while that initial submission is kind of setting out our intent, there's a lot more work to do, and it's not a final step. This is just marking that kind of intent to kind of progress and move forward. And we will need to do quite a bit of work as we move forward to kind of go through that deal and do that negotiation process with central government. So just in terms of the other key activity that's set out in there, one of the main readiness conditions is that we would need to kind of implement the scrutiny protocol. That was published at the same time that the Level 4 devolution framework was published. And it's a key condition, and the guidance states that we would need to implement that scrutiny protocol from 1 year onwards from kind of the Secretary of State agreeing that we can progress. I think we've got a bit more ambition in this area in terms of taking this forward. But the protocol intends to kind of strengthen accountability and assurance. There's 18 key principles in there that are really trying to kind of get to that perspective. And there are 2 further areas that we need to be looking at, which is around potentially a single committee structure and the introduction of Mayor's Question Time, which we know we've already started to implement. The Scrutiny Committee have been looking at this since November. They've set up a working group and they met on the 29th of January. They're also meeting on the 16th of February to look at how they consider the proposals and review feedback from stakeholders. And they'll be fetching a report to their next Scrutiny Committee in March. And we'll also be fetching a report back here on the 14th of March for the Combined Authority for approval. And I think the plan is that we would want to kind of progress quite rapidly with some of those proposals and implement them from June. So kind of doing that in advance of when we actually need to do that. To enable us to do that, you'll see in the paper that there's made reference there to the Independent Remuneration Panel, and that's to ensure that we have got sufficient time for any changes that might be proposed and to implement recommendations at June 2024. It's recommending that there's an independent remuneration panel be convened to kind of review any allowances that might arise as a result of kind of the processes that are agreed. And that's required by legislation for us to kind of do that. I think just important to note that as we've been developing this work, and you'll see set out in the paper, there's an outline there of the work that we've been doing around improving our partnership arrangements and the principles within which we're working. I think that's really important in terms of the journey that we're going on. This is a different way of working, and if we do get closer to that single settlement, it will require us to work in different ways, and that it's really important that we've reviewed the partnership arrangements. I think some of the comments around duplication, we do not want to be duplicating things that are happening, so the principles there have been designed to sit alongside some of the work that we're doing. So you'll see there around sovereignty, protecting the interests of local authorities, and that subsidiarity and devolution. We're not here to kind of duplicate work that's at all that is happening in local authorities, and we've got to work quite carefully to do that. So that partnership stuff is very important in terms of taking this work forward. I just draw people's attention to that section in the paper. So just in terms of next steps, we have now submitted the letter to government. Local councils are now going away and they're taking this back to their own councils for ratification. We'll be taking further discussions with the government in how we're going to implement this moving forward, and we'll be doing that in partnership with councils, but it's also that further work that I've outlined around the scrutiny protocol, which is going to be really important in terms of kind of progressing. And I'll stop there, just in terms of that paper.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview of the paper. Really, really welcome. And just to also say we had our first Mayor's Question Time, which is one of the expected scrutiny parts of the jigsaw, and the people of Wakefield are lovely. I had some good questions, some robust questions, and our next one is in Calderdale in Halifax at the Peace Hall. So could I ask councillors to alert their constituents to these question times, because it's an opportunity for the public to ask direct, challenging questions to myself. And I'm very grateful to colleagues such as our inclusivity champion, our deputy mayor and council leaders who also attended, and colleagues such as Simon to talk to transport questions for their support at these scrutiny events. So it's a really good step forward for that transparency. You'll know as your mayor and as your colleague, transparency is really, really important, and the ability to scrutinise decisions is the only way forward for mayoralties, and I'm always in the market for further scrutiny. So any thoughts on level 4? Yes, Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm very glad that we're going forward for it, and I know that a lot of work has gone into it, so I want to share the gratitude to officers for having done it. I wonder, this conversation has been had over a consistent period. Very recently, there has been controversy around the Teesside works and the involvement of an elected mayor there. And one of the key issues was around the transparency of decision making. And I would like to have some reassurance that the scrutiny discussions which are being had are ones which are inclusive and that we're not just following the guidance from government, and that we actually think about how we can have our own better level of transparency and scrutiny. I mean, for instance, at the very beginning, this combined authority has multi-party representation, which a lot of them do not, and it's good to have that challenge at the very beginning. One of the weaknesses that we have in our current scrutiny process, for instance, is that the only people who can call in a decision at the combined authority are people who are sitting on a scrutiny board already, which sort of feels counterintuitive to the outside world being able to challenge us. I like the idea of mayor's questions, but they can become potentially a PR opportunity. And one of the more basic things that we can respond to as a combined authority is to take seriously direct correspondence via email and post, for instance, because I think there is a real problem in terms of who you are corresponding with and the accountability to deliver a response and on whose response that is. So I think if that could be incorporated within this, that would be a much stronger, sustainable institution going forward.
Thank you. Just on a couple of things. We have people who respond to emails on a daily basis, and actually the inbox is full of questions that are then supported by policy to get good answers for the members of the public. Also, my deputy mayor holds surgeries. Myself and my deputy mayor are on Message the Mayor on BBC Radio Leeds, that I think it could be any question about anything. And regarding the PR exercise, I'm not sure being in front of the public is a PR exercise. Let me tell you, there's some pretty challenging questions. And if it was a PR exercise, maybe I'd have omitted some of those questions. But I think what's important, and to your point about Teesside, it is really important for the public that they can trust leaders who are delivering at scale for the public. So if you have further suggestions about how we can do that, obviously that is of interest to me as well. But Ben, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Mayor. So I think I wanted to respond to the points about the Teesside report, Councillor Galton. I think your points are well made. Of course, we take that report very seriously, and as you would expect, we are reviewing that in the sense of how do the findings from the investigation translate into the way we do things in West Yorkshire. I think the thing that I would add to your analysis of the situation was that some of the challenges were in the fairly complicated company structures that were set up in relation to the combined authority and some of the other public bodies in Teesside. We don't have that kind of structure here, but looking at where we're going in terms of kind of potential arrangements for the combined authority in the future, we can't rule that out, and so we'd absolutely want to learn the lessons and make sure that we've got the strong governance in place. I don't know whether Caroline wanted to say anything further about that, but you can rest assured that it's a big thing on our agenda.
If I just may say, just about Teesside particularly, that the UK Mayors is a cross-party group. We work really well together to deliver. We all have very similar challenges, and it is always disappointing that we don't get the Mayor of Tees Valley to come and join, because we would then, as mayors, also know a little bit more about what's going on and help and advise each other, as we do, for things to avoid, things to do and amplify. It is a great group of people who represent 22 million people, and I think the cross-party way of working has given us better outcomes. That is the only way to do it at a mayoral level. Caroline, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think only briefly that that there's been a plethora of reports, in terms of failings, and governance is crucial in terms of good governance. That accountability framework throughout is an integral part of that. And I suppose when you look at the Teesside report, it is a complexity in terms of how that's grown and how those gaps have formed, particularly in terms of maybe assumptions that what's in scope, what's in role for different parts of that and the companies. So I think now's a good time for us to actually make sure that we've got our governance. We're growing as an organisation, that governance grows and is able to have that robustness for us at the moment, and that we are ready for whatever steps we take going forward, that we've actually got the bedrock. So it's a key part of my role, working with colleagues here, but we do scrutinise as officers each of these reports that come forward and actually sort of play devil's advocate in terms of that check and challenge back.
Thank you. And level 4 must be attached to transparency, scrutiny and good governance. That has got to be the threshold for that maturity. I wanted to come to Councillor Hinchcliffe. Is it on this point? Yep, Councillor Hinchcliffe, then I'll come back to you, Councillor Galton.
I think it would be useful actually to look at that North East example, that Tees Valley example, and it's a lesson learned exercise really. Because obviously we don't want to be there as West Yorkshire Combined Authority, so it's always just useful learning from what others may have learnt before us and put anything right before it goes wrong. So I think it would be useful actually to have a look at that. It doesn't have to be at a Combined Authority meeting, but as a development opportunity for all of us, I think. Thank you.
I think that's not a bad idea, actually. Thank you, Councillor Galton.
Thank you. I really welcome that. Just as a point of information on the correspondence issue, I wouldn't have such a confidence in the level of efficacy in the correspondence aspect. I have been told a couple of times now, if I want some very basic data, that I should put in a Freedom of Information request. Now, I know that Freedom of Information requests are very expensive processes for local authorities, and I would think that we'd hope to avoid it wherever possible within a combined authority level. So I just think it's one of those things that we need to have a look at.
I think the point about data being open and available is something that I've raised with Sarah coming into our own organisation. Having a dashboard of where we're at, I think, is really important as well. It's a piece of work that we're looking at. Sarah, do you want to comment on that? On the request for data?
Yeah, I think obviously we are trying to look at it does depend what it is, but we are trying to kind of get to a point where we're looking at open data as part of our work across the team. So that is something that obviously being relatively new, that's one of my priorities to be looking at over this coming period really. So yeah, in terms of how we kind of do that.
Thank you. Ben?
Well, I think, as Councillor Gordon said, I will be concerned if that's the feedback you're getting in requests for information from the organisation. The standard we want is to have a publication scheme that ensures that all the relevant data is published and is transparent. And then requests are then dealt with as sensibly as we can be without reverting to formal requests under FOI or the environmental regulations. So we will take that away, and as I said, I'm a little bit concerned that's an issue.
And Councillor Galton, if you have examples, please do feed them back, because it's really important. Obviously, the papers are all online, everything is open and transparent, but if you have exact examples, then of course, escalate them to us. Okie dokie. Yes, Councillor Poulsen.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to the report really, because we've all got a bit sidelined, but yeah, obviously welcome the deeper devolution discussions that have gone on. I was slightly surprised though, because the first I knew about the discussions with the local authorities was reading these papers. So none of the officers in Bradford had actually briefed myself on the conversations that had gone on, and I finally got a briefing note late last night. So it's not been great, the discussion that's gone on about this. Some of it seems slightly lack of detail, and I hope this will come out. For instance, the duplication Sarah mentioned, we don't want duplication, fully agree, but we've got things like public health taxi licensing listed in the report, which is obviously what local authorities do. So there are concerns about how is this going to work. Not much detail in this, and I've not been party to any discussions at a council level on it, so I don't know what's been said and discussed. So it would be good to know. And obviously the scrutiny board, there will be one board from what I understand from the report. So would that be made up of sort of a mixture of councillors and other individuals, maybe from business or local organisations? I'm not sure on that one. And then the section on the technical adjustments goes into things like pensions. Now, I haven't got a problem. I think it's pretty bad that the mayor doesn't get the option to pay into a pension, given the police and crime commissioners can. I don't quite understand why local authority leaders and other councillors are on in that document as well, because councillors don't get a pension. So It just seems a bit unsure, some of this. So I don't know if you can answer any of the...
Sarah, then Ben.
I'll pick up some points that I pick up. I'll hand over to colleagues on some of the others, Councillor Paulson. But just in terms of public health, I think the conversations that we've had with government is that this is a concurrent power, so it will be a power that will be held jointly with local authorities. It's not taking away the powers from local authorities. It's about how the combined authority builds in public health considerations into its work. And we've already started some of that work within the combined authority already. This is about a health in all policies approach. So this isn't about duplicating activity that is done within local authorities at all. And the work we do in partnership will be significant in terms of making sure that we don't cross over that line. Really, it's about applying some of the same principles that local authorities have got into the work that we do. So, for example, if we are developing transport schemes, how are we making sure that we're considering things like air quality within those transport schemes? So that's the kind of approach that we're looking at here. And we've had some real successes around joint work around health in relation to kind of work programmes as well. So it's kind of building on that activity. I think we're a bit ahead of the game on that. So not intended to kind of duplicate. I'll hand over to Simon around taxes.
So the paper makes clear that government has set out a series of suggested areas in level 4 deals for transport. We, along with a number of transport bodies advising mayoral combined authorities, have been very clear with DFT that we see no need for that provision, and that actually what we would much rather see is some work to address some of the implications of legislation of a number of years ago, which has brought about the registering of large numbers of private hire vehicles outside of the local authority areas that they most operate in. So members will be well aware of the number of Wolverhampton licence plates in particular that operate around West Yorkshire. So I can assure members that it isn't an item that we are pressing for.
Thank you. And Councillor Hinchcliffe, and then Ben and Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. So, first of all, obviously, Councillor Paulson, you should be briefed either by West Yorkshire Combined Authority officers or Bradford Council, or both, in fact, so that does need to be sorted out in future. I think this process has gone through at the speed of knots, isn't it, because government had quite an impetus to get it through quite quickly, so we've not had a great deal of time to talk about it as our team either. So this is, I think, an opening gambit. It's not a fait accompli. It is going to lead to, my understanding is going to lead to a series of conversations with government about which bits we want and which bits we think are less favourable to the region. And this is a sort of a direct sort of pick and mix template, I think, and then we'll talk from there. But it's best to be in it rather than to just say no to everything straight away. You know, we want to show we're positive about devolution, and also we want to be able to make quicker decisions with less bureaucracy at regional level to be able to make sure our economy can fly quicker, and I think this would give us that, is my understanding. But of course we're now at the same stage of a lot of other combined authorities saying, right, what does it actually mean on the ground, and therefore I think now is obviously a good time to pick up with other members of the combined authority to make sure you're cited on those issues as well as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, because it wasn't universally welcomed at number 10, so we wanted to make sure that we were, as Councillor Hinchcliffe said, we've got to be in this game. We've got to have that bridge to that trailblazer settlement to get that flexibility and that funding pot that we can get better outcomes at a better cost price, so more value for money when we control the budget. So Ben, Alan, and then back to yourself, Councillor Lamb.
Actually, Chair, Councillor Hinchcliffe has made the point I was going to make. So.
Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to the question about pensions. So there is a inequity in the current position whereby mayors with PCC functions don't have access to a pension, but police and crime commissioners do, and I think a growing recognition that there is also inequity between holders of public office locally versus holders of public office nationally. So if you compare the position of PCCs and MPs, government ministers, etc., and compare that with the increasing level of responsibility that's been given to elected mayors, etc., then there's a case for it which is being raised with government. That then raises the question about other elected members locally, and there is a growing body of voices across the country raising the question of pension entitlement for local elected members, particularly considering it as a potential barrier to standing for public office. So that's why the question is being raised through this mechanism. Okay.
Thank you. And certainly I've been speaking to actually too many young councillors who are like, well, what's the future? And I don't have a pension. And the work is relentless. Everybody knows where you live and you're not being paid a lot of money. And the cost of living crisis is great. So anything we can do in that space is important. Yes, Ben.
So there was one other point, Councillor Paulson, which is that the technical adjustments area is there because of two things that that were kind of in part of the level 4 negotiations. One was essentially officials saying, are there things that cause a problem locally that can be fixed with the devolution process? And that's why you've got the beginning of a technical adjustment list. There are undoubtedly other things as well, but that's the starting position. It doesn't mean there can't be other things that are added in. And the other is that the framework also allows us to look across at other MCAs where they have got powers or responsibilities that we don't have, and look at whether they'd be right for West Yorkshire as well. And again, we need to go through that process.
But also there is the challenge that some of the expected changes come only at the end of the Trailblazer pilots, which is 2026. So we are pushing to say, well, we want to start on smart ticketing, or we've already started this work. Why are we having to wait for outcomes from Manchester or GM? So there's a lot of work to be done, but we needed to get those letters in. We needed to show that we together want further devolution. Okie doke. So Councillor Lamb, last question back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's just on the point, I mean, several people made a point about cross-party working and the importance of it at a mayoral level. It's important here as well. And it's a bit disappointing that opposition members of this board weren't involved in the discussions and the letter and the process, and we're here to help. Yeah, I'm sure we're irritating at times being here. That's part of our job, I guess. But I don't doubt for a second every elected member around this table wants the very best for the people they represent. And the fact that our party's in government at the minute means with our involvement it can become more powerful. So I hope going forward that perhaps learning that the letter's gone in this meeting is perhaps not the right way things should be done should be done. And I'd like to think we are here to help and can work with you to try and make these arguments more powerful. There's lots of welcome things, few concerning things, but we should be working together to do the best for the people we represent.
Councillor Lamb, you just voted against the budget, but I'm not going to take that as a personal slight. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I'm not going to enter into debate about whether Councillor Lamb's irritating or not, but I do think, you know, there is an irony in being picked up a little bit in this discussion around the fact that we're having devolution negotiations about what's right for the people of West Yorkshire, set against a timetable and a list of areas that's been set down, for us, and I don't want to sort of let that point go in the meeting. I do think it's really important. This is you know, we have to be in the room for this stuff to go forward. I think what we're agreeing is to start that process. I'm sure we'd all want different things and a lot more than has been offered by the government, and the sort of the slotting us all into silos at different levels rather than actually what's right for different areas. We know the combined authorities are an increasingly diverse group of areas around the country, but I do think it's the right thing to move. I don't think it's the right thing that we've done to be part of this process. I think it would have been very difficult for us to be outside the room and justify that, and I hope we can move forward on that basis, Mayor.
Thank you so much for that concluding remark. Okie doke. Are we happy to note the publication of Level 4 Devo framework and the work that's taken place to prepare West Yorkshire's response? We are, lovely. And note the scrutiny protocol, the ongoing work, including the convening of an independent remuneration panel. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. So moving on to item 8A, cross-cutting project approvals. This is concerning the gain share capacity funding. The approval seeks an additional 15 million to provide continued support for our partner councils to progress economic development work and pipeline development. Can I invite Sarah just to talk to this item?
Yeah, and I will try to be brief. I'm conscious I've been speaking quite a lot. So obviously the paper is seeking approval for that 50 million additional capacity funding. I'll just run through a little bit of the background just to provide context. So in June 2021, the approach to the single investment fund and the West Yorkshire investment strategy was endorsed. And the WIS sets out the investment priorities, which are outlined in the paper there, which I'm sure colleagues are completely familiar with. And they are multidimensional and complementary, and they're underpinned by 3 cross-cutting priorities around tackling inequalities, inclusive growth, and tackling the climate emergency. And as colleagues are aware, there's a number of priority projects and programmes that are identified as focus on intervention within those kind of priorities. And the capacity funding is one key element in terms of being able to support the combined authority and local councils in particular to deliver that comprehensive pipeline of schemes, and it is absolutely essential in terms of being able to kind of deliver ambitions. So it was agreed in 2022 that approximately 11.4 million would be allocated across financial years 2022, 23 to 24, 25 to kind of boost that capacity really and to make sure that we could deliver on the pipelines that we've kind of got in place. I think, as we know, the challenges that we've currently got financially across the region, particularly local councils, has increased, and this proposal is around trying to further boost that capacity funding to enable us to kind of take forward those programmes and projects that we're wanting to deliver benefits for the area. So essentially, the paper seeking that further £15 million. The paper breaks down that funding, proposed funding for the future. I think previously it was allocated on, it was just distributed out about 1.9 million for each local authority. The 15 million is it's proposed that is on a per population basis. So the figures are outlined in the paper, Mayor, in terms of the allocations and the increases that would mean. So I'll stop speaking there because a bit of the detail is in the paper.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And just to confirm that this goes to councils only, not to ourselves.
So I think originally the first tranche of funding, there was an element there for the combined authority. This second amount is purely for allocation to local councils.
Good stuff. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. This is the paper I referred to earlier around how you could be perceived for laundering public money. The wording in the paper is strange in terms of what it hopes to achieve. It just talks about creating capacity for pipelines, and I have a thing about pipeline decision making. I don't think anybody knows exactly what it is, but it's very short on specifics in terms of what the money is intended for and what success looks like. And it talks about how a report has already gone to the West Yorkshire Political Leadership Group. I'm assuming the members of that group are in this room, but it excludes the likes of me, Councillor Lamb and Councillor Poulsen. So we haven't had access to that report which has been sent to that group, and therefore we haven't got any idea about what kind of schemes this extra funding which is being sent over to councils to add capacity is actually being delivered. And when examples are provided in the report, in Leeds, for instance, it talks about Leeds 2023, which has finished, and this is future funding. So it's a very problematic paper, and it gets back to that problem we said earlier about transferring money from one organisation to another without some transparent level of reporting is problematic. It does, however, talk about a project manager, and it would be useful to know whether that project manager will be reporting to all members of the Wicker Board on the progress of these projects.
Thank you, Councillor. But also just to remind you, we are all the CA. It's not one organisation over here and other organisation over there. We're all members. It is a family, so we're all trying to be as helpful as possible. Who would like to comment on this? Ben?
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. I guess what I would say is that this is about adding capacity to the project teams that are developing the future pipeline of projects. And the original objective here was such that we would have a pipeline of, I guess you'd call them shovel-ready or other projects, ready to go when there were central government competitions that required places to move very rapidly. That remains the goal, and I think it is important that, as referring back to earlier conversations, the Combined Authority needs to look long term at the future of West Yorkshire. We need to understand what those project priorities would look like, and this funding is to help achieve that. What we have in the past suffered from is that the teams in the Combined Authority and in local authorities that were developing those pipelines were often the same teams that were delivering the projects themselves, and often getting pulled from pillar to post when other competitions arose. So the intention of the capacity fund is to provide that kind of dedicated funding for authorities to begin to bring forward those projects. That's why it's slightly non-specific, because it will emerge what those projects are depending upon what the objectives are, both for the local authorities in question and for the Combined Authority. And so it's the attempt to give that certainty that allows local authorities to plan such that they're not always having to react to immediate circumstances. And for that, we think it is very valuable. We will, of course, bring back reports on how the money's been spent and what it is contributing to as the work develops.
Thank you so much. Any further comments? Good stuff. And obviously, Councillor Lewis has heard regarding Leeds 2023, and that will be addressed. So we can approve the scheme to continue in delivering full approval of the Combined Authority's additional funding contribution. The recommendation as set out in the report. All good. Thank you so much. Moving on to item 8B, transport project approvals. We're seeking approval for the revised funding allocations for Kirklees Transport Fund projects. The change, if approved, will affect the funding allocations for 8 schemes as detailed in the report. And before I invite Melanie Corcoran, Director of Transport Policy and Delivery, to talk us through the changes, can I just say to Melanie, this is your last CA meeting before we lose you to South Yorkshire. Our loss is their gain, absolutely. So I wanted to put on record my thanks for your service over the many years that you've worked here at the CA, the advice you've provided me and colleagues since I was elected. And honestly, we all wish you the very best of luck going forward into the future. And just don't be better than us here in West Yorkshire. I jest. Melanie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thanks for your kind words. So just in terms of this approvals paper, by way of background, we are working with all partners on a continuous basis, looking at how best to deliver schemes within our programmes. And we do an annual review on each of our significant programmes. And you may recall that we did an inflation review that looked across Transport Fund and TCF and a little bit of CRSTS, which are the 3 of our largest transport capital programmes. And that's had significant effects on the schemes that we still have in the programme. So this time round, we didn't do a whole-scale financial review on the programme. We looked at milestone reviews and we looked at how schemes were performing. But with Kirklees Council, we identified a number of schemes where either the scheme was on site or it was about to go on site or they were about to come up to a decision point where there was insufficient funding to do that. So that has then triggered a review to look at the Kirklees schemes, and we've brought forward this package of 8 schemes where we want to look at the allocations that are given against each individual scheme. So just very briefly going through the list. So Mirfield to Dewsbury to Leeds. This is a joint scheme looking at active travel on the the Kirklees side of the joint scheme with Leeds. So there is work still progressing on the Leeds side. On the Kirklees side, we agreed that we would take the scheme to outline business case. There is further funding that's required. The scheme will pause and it will go onto our pipeline so that we've got an opportunity to take a scheme forward into a future funding programme. We've then got A629, this is the Halifax to Huddersfield key corridor, and phase 5 Ainley Top. So there were elements of this scheme. Again, we have looked at each scheme to look at where we could reduce costs. There is an element of this scheme where residents didn't want that element of the scheme to progress. There's a proposal here where that comes out of the scheme, so that we are looking to value engineer. However, there are still increased costs because of the inflation costs now and the position that we're in, but also having delayed the procurement and the construction of that scheme. Obviously, costs are still continuing to rise. Huddersfield Southern Corridors, this was part of the Corridor Improvement Programme. We did receive the LTN 120 guidance around active travel while this scheme was being developed. That resulted in redesign. We've then had increasing cost pressures. The revised FBC has now been submitted, but there is an increased request in terms of funding. North Kirklees orbital route, this was one of the transformation schemes, and again this is a request to draw down now the remaining balance of the funding that's approved for that scheme. And then Home Firth Town Centre, we've got a proposal here to improve accessibility into and around the town centre. And at the moment, the footpaths are so narrow, it's difficult to walk on them, let alone with a pram or a wheelchair or a mobility scooter. And there are some safety issues there. So we need to make it easier for people to get around there. And it is quite a visitor attraction as well. So we need to make sure that it's safer in the town centre. So again, there's an increased ask. We have value engineered. As we've de-scoped the scheme, the costs are then still going up because of inflation pressures. So we find ourselves in a very difficult position where we are delivering less for increased funding on a lot of our capital programmes. And the next one, similar. So we've got A62 Smart Corridor. This one is on site, largely complete, but again, unforeseen costs, some third-party costs and some issues that are still ongoing. So there's still some work there where there is now a funding gap. We've then got City Connect Phase 3. This is one that we agreed to pause when we got to OBC. There is still some further funding required to get to OBC. And similarly, A629 from Huddersfield Town Centre down to Waterloo Junction. There's some development work ongoing, but there's still some further funding required to get to OBC. And then finally, A62 corridor, A62 Cooper Bridge. So it's the junction where the A62 meets A644, and then there's a link to the motorway and across to Brighouse. So that junction is really significant, and it's significant to get in and out of Huddersfield. It's a significant scheme, and potentially at this stage the costs have gone up significantly as well, in line with the others. The proposal here is that we look at a reduced scope and we look at, if you like, a phase 1 of the Cooper Bridge scheme. So council officers are working on what, well, ideally a change request initially, but also a revised outline business case to show what can be achieved if we significantly de-scope this scheme. And we would be looking at identifying bus journey improvement times. So it's quite significant for us, that corridor, and it will be subject to that business case coming in. But the proposal is that, if you like, we shrink the scope of the scheme that is currently in the Transport Fund, so that overall that the net change it balances out within the programme. So the proposal is that we address all of those reallocations for Kirklees Council, and actually we will continue to work with other partners, and again may bring reviews forward with other partners too. There has been implications on the amount of match funding that is available as well, which then has had an impact on the scope of the schemes as well. So the recommendations are set out in paragraph 4.49. So there's a table with all the schemes, the changes in allocation, and the recommendations there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I congratulate you as well on the way that we've been able to team and ladle these projects, because delivery from our local authority partners. We're happy to approve these recommendations. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, and I appreciate the report and the explanations. I'm not familiar with these schemes, and I don't feel there's enough information personally to say, yeah, I'm happy to say I support an extra £20 million going out. I don't know if there's a way scrutiny can be more involved to get more information, because I suspect we're going to be having similar papers coming back for all of the local authorities. And it's, yeah, there's inflation, pressures, all sorts of things. I personally don't feel there's enough information just to sit here and nod through that much additional money.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Is it your abstention noted? Yes, thank you so much. We're happy to approve moving forward. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, moving on. And apologies, we're having to rattle through as a train waits for no woman. So I will make sure that we are good and pithy. Moving on to our next item, Inclusivity Champion. Really pleased to welcome Fatima Khan Shah to the first meeting of the Combined Authority, such an important area of work, and to lead our direct our inclusion activity, ensure the economic recovery benefits absolutely everyone. And it just shows how committed leaders in West Yorkshire are to tackling inequalities, celebrating and building on its many significant strengths, including diversity of its places and people. So without further ado, over to yourself, Fatima, to talk us through the development of the Inclusivity Champion and highlights.
Thank you, Mia Braben. It's not often I'm referred to as a train, but I'll take that because I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. Is it fair to say that I'm really excited to be here? Because I really am. I think there's just so much to talk about and so much activity's been going on, and it's also a great chance to meet some new people and to hopefully start some new relationships. So I'm going to go straight into it, Mia Braben, because I'm mindful of the time. And the first thing is just to give you a little bit of a context of what is the role of the Inclusivity Champion. So if I could have the next slide, please. Apologies to people that I've already discussed this with and are sick of hearing the remix of the same song. But for those of you that are new or are watching online, that the whole purpose of the Inclusivity Champion was very much an aspiration between the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership, which is a consortium of organisations, providers, commissioners, delivering health and care services, and the Combined Authority, and their infinite wisdom, recognising that health is wealth and wealth is health. And there's an opportunity here to really work in partnership with each other to address some of the issues that are mutually beneficial, and having somebody with a foot in both camps can really, really add value. There's also something about a recognition that there are some deliverables that would actually be beneficial for both organisations if we focused on inclusivity or structural inequalities as a common thread in all the work that we do, as well as, where possible, developing or looking at other opportunities to maximise impact. And I think everybody knows that relationships are really, really important, but take a lot of time to invest in. But having these connected ways of working and really embodying what we say when we mean real change happens in real work enables us to make change happen at pace. And I hope that this report assures you that change is happening at pace. So if we could move on to the next slide. I think the first thing that I would always say is, if those of you that are not familiar with the work of the Health and Care Partnership, please do take a look. If someone stopped me on the street outside Wellington House and asked me what my day job was, I'd say positive disruptor, but also somebody committed to delivering 10 system ambitions on behalf of the Health and Care Partnership. And they range on things like addressing health inequalities, making sure that we get cancer diagnoses earlier, but it also talks about diversity in leadership, it talks about sustainability of the economy, and it also talks about climate change. And if you compare them with the Mayor's 10 pledges, then clearly, you know, she was ahead of the game when the intersectionality was really recognised, and actually there's lots of opportunities. So with that in mind, there was an agreement that went to the Health and Care Partnership Board, which is the sort of highest level of decision making in the health and care system, which has representation from our amazing leaders on there too. And there was an agreement to sort of share resources, which is myself and a couple of other individuals, to focus on sort of 4 specific areas, but also others where they made sense to do so. The first one was really recognising the economic growth and how that is really important to address people's lived experience of inequality. But there's also something of recognising that if we truly want to address the climate emergency and the impacts that has on people's health and well-being, then doing that with the lens of inclusion really adds value. And a really simple example of that is when we were recently having an engagement conversation on the big climate chat, the overwhelming bit of feedback was safety and the fact that, yeah, I'm more than happy to use transport, but if I don't feel safe using the transport, or I can't get on the transport, or I can't access a bus, how am I going to support my contribution to the climate emergency? And poverty was also a really important part of that conversation. And then there are the obvious areas of making sure that we tackle structural inequalities, but also, as I said, really maximising the focus on the wider determinants of health. So if you move on to the next slide, and I am going to be quite pacey to give you all a chance to have a conversation about this. What I did was I tried to, as much as I can, get out everywhere. I think a lot of people were sick of the sight of my face on virtual webinars or face-to-face meetings. And what we tried to do was to co-create a plan while doing the plan. So building a bridge while you're on it, which is complicated at best. And what we wanted to do was to create something that didn't duplicate existing work, but also really embodied the aspiration and the ambition that you all have for West Yorkshire. So I remember when I was applying for this job and I watched the combined authority meetings on the webcast, I once counted ambition 10 times in a meeting. So, you know, we don't just talk about ambition, we think about it, we do it in every decision that we make. But in order to be truly ambitious, we need to make sure that we're making the right decisions that improve safety, that are fair for everyone, and improves outcomes for everybody within West Yorkshire. And as we know, that is not currently the case, because depending on where you live, your life expectancy could drop. Depending on whether you're somebody that lives in a certain borough with an ethnicity that is ethnically diverse, that again reduces your life expectancy. And if you are somebody that is living in that borough with an ethnically diverse background and with a disability, then you might not get past 40. So that, to me, is something that we really need to focus on using our collective resources, because that's not right, is it? And there are things within our gift that we can really do to support it. But in order to do that, and you as elected members know this far better than I do, we need to support people to help create the decisions that we're going to take and therefore meet their needs. And in order to do that, we need the rooms that decisions are being taken to be more diverse, and to make sure that the people contributing to those conversations are diverse. It's only by then that we can address the inequalities. And if you go back to the COVID pandemic, which is still alive in my memory, I've still got the bags from it, there is something about recognising that the interventions we were doing prior to this were not reaching everyone. And it required us to work differently. It required us to use innovation, but also to work with individuals and organisations in a very, very different way. There's an opportunity to harness the learning from that and capitalise on it to support the work that we aspire to do in this organisation, as well as the Health and Care Partnership. But it isn't just me. Obviously, I work really closely with the amazing Mandy Ridyard, because we know that if we get this right, that includes us creating an economy that is productive, that thrives. And if an economy is thriving, then that means people's quality of life is better, and by default, their health outcomes are even better. But another element to a thriving economy is a cohesive society. If people don't feel comfortable or able to thrive or contribute to communities, that really, really has a massive impact to the economy. So it's therefore in our interest to really support social cohesion. And in order to do that, we've got to focus on discrimination. That also enables us to work with communities to support their resilience. And I'm looking at Jane when I say this, but you know, Calderdale already is next level when it comes to resilience. And one of the amazing things that I heard when I had the kind invitation to visit your cabinet was the assets that you utilised, the community organisations that pulled together and really supported the local authority when it comes to supporting in times of adversity. And that's a fantastic example of the creativity, the innovation and the sustainable change that is already taking place across our region that I'm hoping to harness and amplify across the region. So if we move on to the next slide, what we tried to do while building the bridge at the same time, next one please, was to focus on 5 areas, which was really hard for me because I'm a lady who wants to change the world and I wanted to focus on 10. But a very wise person who sat down there called Mayor Braben said, no, Fatima, we need to focus. So we focused initially on 5 elements that was fed back through the initial conversations. The first one, as I've already alluded to, is the importance of working with the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. Part of that is the learning from the COVID pandemic and their utilisation of connections to grassroots communities. their ability to amplify really important messages, say vaccinations, or right now, for example, in the measles pandemic, they are instrumental in being those trusted ambassadors of messages that people will listen to. Because sometimes it's not the message, is it? It's the messenger. There's also a real recognition that we need to support them during these challenging financial times, because we know that many organisations are experiencing specific financial challenges, but also support them to be sustainable. So if you're thinking about those really small grassroots organisations that don't have the infrastructure to go for all those different bids, or the larger ones for, say, the big lottery, there's an opportunity for us as an organisation to support them with the appropriate infrastructure to enable them to access funds, as well as the funds provided by the combined authorities' various schemes. If you think about providing advice and support, well, that's really obvious, isn't it? But there's also something about having a seat at the table to influence decision making. And I'm really fortunate, particularly within the Health and Care Partnership, that I am a member of their Integrated Care Board. I have a seat at their partnership board and their system leadership forums to enable not only the decisions they take to be those through the inclusive lens, but also to influence their thinking and to be more aspirational when it comes to the agenda of inclusion. We have to be really honest about the fact that advocating for equality sometimes comes with personal and professional risk. It can also be really hard for some of our leaders to do, and that advice and insight really supports them with some of the challenging instances that we've recently seen, bearing in mind the recent few months in the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. But the Ukrainian conflict is another example of how actually leaders are instrumental in supporting people that work within their organisations, as well as utilise their services in creating those inclusive services. Another element of that is the importance of a diverse workforce. So if you've got a workforce that is reflective of its communities, that community is more likely to use it because it delivers it in a way that they need them to, but also improves their outcomes, and they feel comfortable and trustworthy to access it. And we know that there is a real time low when it comes to people's perceptions of the public sector and their trust in the public sector. So supporting leaders with this really complicated agenda with a sophisticated work plan is crucial to us creating a West Yorkshire that is not only at the forefront of the country, but hopefully the world. But then again, I said I was ambitious, didn't I? Then we're talking about advocating for social justice, and it's really building on the incredible work that has been started by the organisation and this leadership. So things like the male behavioural change campaign and the Just Don't, which has received millions of views on YouTube and has had an amazing reception. But there's also other campaigns such as the Root Out Racism campaign that was initially started a couple of years ago when we were looking at phase 2, but also the NHS Sexual Health Charter, which is something that we are really mindful of for organisations and people that are delivering service within the community. Paramedics in particular have got a reportedly high incidence of being impacted by this agenda. So working with those organisations is a particular focus and will continue to be so. And then you've got the we own what we create element of the plan, which is ensuring that groups within communities that are seldom heard and seldomly participate in the work that we do, either in the combined authority or the Health and Care Partnership, feel a real change in their ability to engage, but also the impact of their contributions. And this is being done in a variety of ways. One is the staff networks and convening people together to influence change. Another is working with existing mechanisms of engagement to influence the way that they're working, sharing contacts, being an ambassador for the organisations, but also using different platforms to engage with different individuals and different conduits for different messages. And on that journey, as somebody is always looking for feedback and touch points, some of the messages that came back was, this is really broad, there's lots of stuff in here, and there's a little bit of lack of clarity of what exactly the inclusivity champion is doing and how I can support that particular role. So as an organisation and as a leader that's always trying to be iterative of the process, that was always bared in mind through all the conversations and engagement that I had. So if you go on to the next slide, that's just a snapshot of the sort of external facing. But obviously being a proud member of the combined authority, what we were also doing was supporting some internal work led by officers within this organisation. So for example, the way in which we recruit and work with our workforce, about the way in which we develop our talent and harness that talent and keep them, about the way in which we engage and involve people on behalf of the work that we're doing within this organisation, the current EDI plan and the deliverables of that, as well as working with the executive leaders within this organisation and their relationship with the staff networks. We've also recently had some really big influential conversations about our economic strategy, the housing strategy, but also based on feedback from a visit that I had to the Leeds Cabinet, really making sure that children and young people are considered in all the decisions we make, because quite often, although they are 20% of our population and 100% of our future, they're not often routinely considered in the action and decisions that we take. So again, real iterative process. And as a consequence, if we can move on to the next slide, we've revised the work plan in a way to make it a little bit clearer. So the deliverables are the same, nothing has changed except the way in which we framed it. So if anybody stopped me on the street and said, so Fatima, what exactly do you do? The three bits above are what I would say. So, you know, I'm here to build capability to change practice and help deliver more inclusive outcomes. And the reason why that's really important is because we need to show the added value of the inclusivity agenda, particularly at the moment when there's a lot of conversation about why do we have it and what value does it bring. There's also something about the fact that inclusive leadership is instrumental to all that we do, and we can't forget the people that work within our organisations who are often sharing with us their experiences, not always positive, and trying to support them to harness that change in a way that not only benefits them but the organisation and what we deliver. There's also the aspiration that Tracy is always at the forefront of, which is advocating for a more inclusive and fairer West Yorkshire. So how that will be done is very much an amalgamation of the 5 jigsaw slides that you saw. So providing advice and support to senior leadership, which is the inclusive leadership and the expert advice pulled into one area. Then there's the part about including the VCSE and creating opportunities for people that we don't normally hear from will be covered within the convening networks part. And then the final one about developing partnerships and enabling joint working is the societal justice. So what I've tried to do is make it as clear as possible, put it on a card, put it on a lanyard, you know exactly what the inclusivity champion is here to do. And if we move on to sort of the final slide, what we're trying to do is by demonstrating impacts. I've already talked you through a lot of things that we've already done, but what I'm trying to do now is to demonstrate that even though we're building the bridge as we're going along, we're making a lot of progress. So we've clearly got some very good contractors. One of them is making sure that the partners are engaged in the work, really working collaboratively with a number of diverse VCSE organisations and then connecting them into the work of things like the climate chat, the mass transit work, the inclusive economic strategy, and also the newly established Women of West Yorkshire network, which has currently got 350 members last night, but it's still growing every single day, which is fantastic. And obviously we've got the next event, which is taking place on the 8th of March, and I'd really welcome women and allies, if they're available, to come and join us in Leeds. There's also recognising how we can support existing work programmes to look at things through the lens of inclusion and looking forward as well as building on existing good practice. And as you know, digital and AI is something that is causing a lot of consternation and concern among certain groups about the equality implications of that. So one of the things that I've started to do is to chair that particular group, really supporting the work that they're doing, and also contributing to a number of forums to ensure that the decisions that we're taking are truly, truly inclusive and tackle some of the systemic issues within society. So if we move on to the next slide, and I promise you I'm going to stop talking very soon, there's also the importance of championing that inclusive workforce, and I can't talk about that without talking about the incredible Fair Work Charter and the amazing work that colleagues within this organisation have put in to create that. And as we know, we've already got 47 adopters, which is amazing, but we're not going to stop there. There's also the implementation of the Inclusive Recruitment Toolkit, which was something that was created by the Health and Care Partnership, and recognising that 1 in 5 of public sector employees are people that balance work and caring responsibilities, as well as 1 in 3 in the NHS. So there's real importance of adopting the working carers passport as well.
Sorry to jump in just while you've caught your breath. It's an amazing presentation, Fatima, thank you. Yeah. I have to catch a train, okay. So I'm handing over the chair to Councillor Lewis. But luckily, I've seen the slides, and can I congratulate you for the dynamism that you've brought to this role, thank you. But James is now in the chair. Thanks all.
I promise, Councillor Lewis, I'll be really, really quick. So again, talking about the recognition and intersectionality between health and wealth, I've also taken on the responsibility of Senior Responsible Officer for the Health Inclusion Network. So that is a very practical forum by which we're integrating the wider determinants of health and the health agenda in a forum where we can really make progress on the agenda like I've described. We've also just attended the graduation ceremony of Cohort 2 of the West Yorkshire Fellowship and launched Cohort 3. So that is definitely going full throttle as well. So like I said, we're not only talking about the agenda, we're delivering tangible outcomes so people can see the value add. And then the final slide, I promise, is advocating for a more inclusive West Yorkshire. So what we're trying to do here is facilitating convened spaces that people feel psychologically safe to contribute and influence conversations that we need to have. So a variety of mechanisms that we're doing, which you can see on the screen, really influencing the engagement strategy as I've just described, but also as a member of the NHS Assembly, the King's Fund and other national forums, really trying to influence policy before it comes to West Yorkshire, which is just as important as well. And as being part of the incredible leadership team that we've got in the Combined Authority, working with those other leaders to ensure that everything that we're doing is in the interests of a more inclusive and fairer West Yorkshire. So I'm going to pause there, Councillor Lewis, with just 3 questions on the next slide, which is just to stimulate the conversation. Because I'm somebody who's always keen to learn from others, and one of the things I'd like to do is to connect with other individuals at the table that I've not had a chance to meet yet, and to get some feedback about how we can continue to collaborate together, how I can support you, but also how we can continue to collaborate in partnership to maintain the momentum, but more importantly, to deliver the change. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board? Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. If you'll excuse me, I won't answer those questions.
Okay.
Because I don't think we've got time for a workshop. But I can ask questions on the paper if I can actually get in.
Yeah. And you can answer the questions via email afterwards as well if you don't feel you've got the time today.
Right, page 138. There was a long list of bullet points of stuff that you've done. And I'm particularly interested in the last 2 bullet points on there. Because one of the things that we've discussed today is this is a very large organisation. It has a budget of 800 million quid. And a lot of that is to do with transport and its physical infrastructure. And one of the problems that we have as decision makers is making sure that all of the equality impacts are properly assessed.
Yeah.
But the reporting that we get isn't in a sophisticated manner. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So we haven't got the confidence that all the questions have been asked that they should have. So it says here that you are working collaboratively with the communications and engagement team to ensure that that's the question time. Supported the development of the approach towards the development of a diverse and inclusive consultation and engagement strategy. So how do we know, for instance, that when a scheme's going out or we're discussing concessionary fares or whatever, that we've actually talked to people of lived experience and that we've had to think about which equality characteristics might potentially most need to be engaged with on a meaningful manner. So for instance, we're used to having consultation where you're asked something like, did you walk here, or did you take the bus here, or did you get the car here? But that tells you nothing unless you know why they made that choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I'm wanting to understand is, what do you think hasn't been done very well so far and you think could be improved?
Really big question, but as a woman who likes to talk a lot, I'm going to try and keep it short. I think the first answer to your question is, we are currently working on the inclusive engagement strategy, so it's about to go through the governance processes. It hasn't been published yet and therefore hasn't been implemented. On the specific agenda of bus and mass transit, one of the first things as part of my role as advising the team on the engagement was you don't need to speak to the people on the buses, you need to speak to the people that aren't getting the buses and find out why. You also need to go and see what the data is telling you and where the gaps are in the data when it comes to your engagement and involvement. And you also need to use a variety of mechanisms, because if you're like my children, they're not going to answer a survey, they're not going to respond to your email. In fact, if I went up and had a chat with you, no disrespect, Councillor Galton, you might not even want to talk to me. So there's something about how we use the appropriate stakeholders and mechanisms to ensure that people have got the opportunity to influence this where they are. But what we've always done in a health and care and local government, if I may say with respect, is we've done it in a way that suits us. So my aspiration is to try and influence a new way of working where we start to evolve, and it won't happen overnight because we're turning the Titanic here, aren't we? What we do want to do is, with examples like mass transit and the big climate chat and the economic strategy, is show the added benefit of working in a slightly different way and how that intelligence can improve the service we finally deliver and the uptake and outcomes of the people utilising it. Does that answer your question? I tried to be to the point.
Yes, it was very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Comments? Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
I just welcome the report, obviously, and I think, it's around for all of us, isn't it, that the whole purpose of the whole organisation is to be levelling up the region, actually. And that's what we need to ask ourselves constantly. Are we doing that every day? Are we making sure that those people who are furthest away from economic opportunity are now closer to it because of the actions of the whole combined authority? Fatima can only do so much on her own, but it needs to be the whole of the combined authority needs to work towards that aim. And obviously that will benefit places like Bradford, where there is high, structural disadvantage, given we've got a number of communities from all parts of the world who settled in Bradford and actually may have been there for generations, now creating wealth themselves. But we need to make sure we're inclusive as an organisation in what we deliver and make sure we have a positive outcome for levelling up in West Yorkshire.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody else want to come in? Mandy, please.
Can I just say thank you for your enthusiasm and for the amount of dedication you've shown to putting that report in. I think it's fantastic. It's something that we obviously all want, so well done, Fatima.
Great, thank you. I don't see anybody else wanting to come in, so I'm sure happy to note the report, and thank you, Fatima, for your presentation. So we'll just move on to the last paper on the agenda today, which is the committee membership. Does anybody wish to comment on the committee membership paper? Caroline, please.
Just very quickly, the paper's clear on the face of it. There's just an addition to make. So in terms of the recommendation 1.3, termination of appointments from Kirk Lees to Transport and Economy Scrutiny Committee, we have had verbal updates since then for nominations. So for the purposes of the decision today and the minutes, they are for the Kirk Lees nomination for Transport Committee and Transport Committee Engagement Lead is Councillor Matthew McLaughlin and Councillor Yusra Hussain for the Economy Scrutiny post. So that's just an additional point to the recommendations as set out in that report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Everybody happy?
Yes.
Everybody happy with that?